Olga is back on the show, one of my all-time favorite writers and journalists, and you have a new book, a new baby, and a lot of news since I last talked to you. So huge congratulations right off the bat for all of it, personal and professional.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yes, I can't believe you're out here promoting this book that you poured your entire life into while also parenting a 1-year-old. I'm very impressed.
I'm very tired, but thank you.
I'm sure. But that wasn't one of the things that you got into this for in terms of changing that about your life, changing your personality in terms of your exhaustion. That's probably something new. But you did decide to have a baby, which is a big change.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, the personality change project that I undertook, I think got me to a point where I decided to have a baby, which is something that I had waffled about for basically a decade at that point. So it did in that way get me closer to yes get me all the way to yes, actually, on the baby having issue.
I love your work because it's both personal but also scientific. Me, but better. The science and promise of personality change. And I got to start with the obvious that a lot of curmudgeons, I guess you get to a point in your life. I feel like it's the kind of thing you get to a point in your life where you say, people don't change and you can't change. Let's just start there. That is not true, is it?
People do change. We all change. Even the people who say that people don't change will change. Almost everyone changes on at least one personality trait over the course of their lives, according to research that's followed people over many years. And most people change in these like sort of predictable ways. They become more conscientious as they get older. They become less neurotic. But we also change in all different directions, kind of individually.
What about the science around what the laymen and women refer to as nature versus nurture? Because people have a pretty hardwired idea about that too. You're born this way and your environment, your upbringing can change you a little bit. But the thing that I find fascinating, and I'm sure I know there's some science around this studying siblings, is that if you're like me and you have 2 kids and you come from multiple siblings, right? Anybody can anecdotally say, I am like my sibling or I'm not. We have 2 daughters raised in the same house, super close. Couldn't be more fortunate about how close they are, but they're extremely different. They look different. They are different in all the ways. So anecdotally, I'd say that is nature. But nurture apparently has a lot to do with it. And after reading your book, I realized there's a whole bunch of science. How good is it?
So what you're picking up on is exactly correct, which is that we all get genes obviously from our parents, but it's not like we're like this direct copy of our parents and we're exactly like them. Then everyone would be the same forever. Instead, we get these genes and they get combined in these unpredictable ways. And that's only the genetic component of your personality, which is only about half. Because there's this whole other component that is influenced by the environment. So it's things like, do you go to college? Did you get married? Who are your friends? What are your hobbies? Individual things that are up to you and your environment that influence your personality in various ways.
And wasn't there some study that looked at kids in terms of how they turned out, and they turned out completely different, or what was it? I don't know. I don't have my notes.
Yeah, siblings are not similar to each other. Like they're basically as different as like 2 random people that you could pick off the street.
Yeah, that's what it was. They can be as different as 2 random people, even though they grew up in the same household and had the same parents. That's crazy to me to read.
And the same genetics, yeah.
And the same genetics.
Yeah.
Most importantly, the same genetics, which disproves all of it. Your book is just I said it in the intro, as a person who spent most of my life doing stand-up comedy. You're so funny. I laughed out loud so many times in reading this book. And not that I needed to be reminded because I've been reading you for a long time, but a great writer, but the humor makes it all so much better. And you're constantly looking at it through your own experience, because a lot of this, you include your own life. Tell us about how you wrote this. You went on your own journey and took on a year-long experiment. And then we learned so much about you, all the intimate things about your life, your insecurities, your vulnerables, and of course, the personality characteristics that you wanted to change. So a little bit more about how you took this on and what you did.
Yeah, a few years ago, I noticed that though my life was not bad, it was actually quite good. I often would just melt down over tiny things that would aggravate me throughout the day. And this is the kind of stuff that happens to all of us: getting a bad haircut, getting stuck in traffic, getting an annoying message from my boss. I would just totally fall to pieces when all of these things would add up and add up. And I would be like, my life is horrible. I hate everyone. I would just want to have Netflix and wine time by myself. And I was like, wait, is my life horrible? Or do I just have this tendency to see things in the worst possible way? So as I started to learn more about personality change, I realized that personality and personality traits are at the root of so much of what determines our daily mindsets and behaviors. And it determines whether we can achieve our goals and whether we can live life the way we want to live it. So that's why I decided to go about solving this existential crisis through personality change.
I have the one stupid assumption I make. It's just really not fair and it's stupid. But I look at someone like you and other people in your lane, journalists and writers who very highly educated, super smart people. That's what I would put you in this category of super smart people. And I say, Olga can't possibly have the types of anxieties and concerns that other people that I have, because I'm not as smart as Olga and she must figure it out. I know that's dumb, but I'm sure it's not that uncommon. I also feel like I do that with a lot of people who I think have financial security. They can't be worried about anything because as long as they have enough money, that's the root of all of our problems, which is also super naive and dumb and ignorant, but I do it. What do you say to those kind of silly assumptions? You do it too, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that I'm smart, but I am definitely not an exception to this. When I took my first personality test, so I was following this like scientific personality testing website throughout this whole experience to track my progress. And the first personality test I took, it said I was more neurotic than something like 97% of the population, which in neuroticism is like anxiety and depression. So I was like, I had my same job that I have now. It's a great job. I had my same partner that I have now. I lived in the same house that I do now. I had all these things going for me, but I was still very anxious and I wasn't appreciating it. And I think that's true for a lot of people. The more you have, the more you stand to lose. And some of these like ways of thinking about your circumstances and your emotions that were maybe protective at an earlier age or an earlier time, they can build and build as you have more stressors to deal with.
I love the way you write about your husband. He seems like the man I want to be, by the way. Like he seems like such a calm and confident and cool guy. And I also like him because he allows you to write so much about him. But you also get to judge and probably run all kinds of things past him when it comes to personality. And you talk about how different his is than yours as well. Break it down for us. These personality characteristics. What are we talking about? What does it mean, personality?
Yeah, just to name one, neuroticism, I'm very high on that one. He is very low on it. I actually don't think he's ever felt anxious. Like he doesn't know what I mean
Really?
when I say that I'm anxious. He's just, I don't know. I think we'd probably have to go back to his teenage drug use. But he's very relaxed. So that's one trait. So then we have openness to experiences, which is like imaginativeness and creativity. We're both really high on that one. Extroversion versus introversion. We like how sociable you are, how outgoing. Which is like warmth and empathy and trust in other people. He is also very agreeable and I am not, or at least I wasn't when I started. And and then neuroticism. And so those are the 5 traits that everyone has that makes up your personality.
And so you told us about what, after taking these personality characteristics, you identified as your personality, and you talked about what your goals would be to change. One of them was agreeability. The other was the neuroticism. But you also didn't, I think it's important that you say and you write and help us. It's so important. It's such an important book to change the things that we don't like about ourselves. But you say you want to keep the things that you do. And for you, it's things like you're a hard worker and you're organized, et cetera. So what did you want to change?
Yeah, so one of the first things I wanted to change is actually my level of extroversion. And this is controversial because I actually identify still as an introvert. And a lot, there's this tendency of like, I'm an introvert. I need quiet time to myself. Leave me alone. And I do need some quiet time to myself. But I think what I was finding, and the research aligns with this, is that if I could occasionally go out and talk to people, socialize, whatever, just hang or do things in groups, I actually felt better than if I spent that time by myself. That sometimes spending time by myself wasn't the solution to feeling down or isolated. The solution was actually to get out and connect with others. So that was like a pretty big realization for me that actually is supported by the science.
You did all kinds. I can't believe you did all this. Like because you wanted to change that quality of and become more extroverted. You did all kinds of pretty weird I shouldn't say weird. That was your last book, but interesting, brave, courageous things for someone like yourself. You joined an improv class, you volunteered at a place, you did, you had a party, which I thought that section was hilarious to read and relatable. What are the things that you did and how did they work?
Yeah. So you got it there for extroversion, just joined a bunch of groups and tried to get out as much as possible. I would say the most effective thing for that was the improv, actually, just because I think, and this is maybe true of a lot of journalists, you start to get in a place where you like to really control conversations because you're always interviewing people and you like to have this very predictable back and forth. And improv, I don't know, you're probably familiar with it, is not that. It's very chaotic. Yeah, people just throw things at you. You got to respond in the moment. Sometimes you like don't even like really quite hear what's going on or know what's going on, and you're just, but you still have to make a scene work with someone. And that to me was like very good practice for what it feels like when a situation is out of control, but it's still okay. Like it's still all going to be okay. It's all going to work out. We're all going to be done with the scene after 4 to 5 minutes. But it was just very good. I think I needed that kind of chaotic fun time in my life.
I feel like there's a way to take the converse of everything we learned in your book and apply it from the top down. I'm not sure how effective it would be. Just you mentioned improv. If a company or organization, and they sometimes do, brought in improv teachers and you did improv workshops, it would help folks at work. And I would say that would be true of a number of the other things that you prescribe and suggest. I wonder if some people reading your book will want to apply a lot of these personality changes or efforts to their organization, to their family, much less their company. Did you think a lot about that? If you wrote about that part, I missed how it would be applied.
I didn't write as much about like corporate stuff, though I think a lot of this could be applied in a corporate setting. So one of the things that I did that I thought would be particularly effective for that is I went to this conversation workshop in London and it was a little bit strange, but one of kind of the most interesting takeaways from that is that a lot of times when we're talking to people, you don't actually learn much. Like you get a list of facts from them, but you don't actually understand what's motivating them or what any given thing means to them. So a lot of that was just like learning how to ask the kind of questions that will get at the deeper importance behind what someone is saying or doing. And it made me think that if you're having a conflict with someone at work, applying some of these techniques could really help get to the bottom of those things faster, because instead of saying, let's do it my way, let's do it your way, you could start to get to, okay, why is this important to you? Like, why are, where is this coming from? Where are you coming from? And I think we just don't naturally do that. It didn't feel natural at the time.
You talk about how many different styles and studies there have been on styles of conversation too. I mean, you say you took this workshop in the UK, which made me laugh because I bet you it's different in the United States. A workshop on
it was really interesting because they were really reserved, I would say, compared to Americans, especially like I'm from Texas, and like it just, the vibe was so different than what I would expect of that kind of setting. And it was like everyone would say the barest amount to, I don't know, I felt like everyone was holding back a little. Maybe it's just like a girl thing.
Yeah, they're more private. We just throw everything out there. That's a pretty sweeping.
I was definitely the most talkative person at the workshop. And I was like, I feel like the lady's going to kick me out for talking too much.
It's American journalists. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Brilliant. You talked about extroversion, what you did a little bit, just a little bit. You got to read the book if you want it all. Neuroticism is the one that probably most of us, you know what, maybe define it. I think these words need real definitions, because I had no idea that I had dealt with some depression in my life, or that it might be underlying at times, because I thought it was more anxiety. And I never wanted to say that I dealt with depression. And then I still have a hard time with that, connecting to that idea, or I think that when I deal with it, it's very circumstantial. So I think unpacking what these words mean, they mean different things to different people. But talk to me about neuroticism and what it is, what it was for you, and how you jumped off the cliff to attack that one.
Yeah, so neuroticism for me was mostly anxiety, but the trait itself encompasses both anxiety and depression. And
Right.
it's basically like having these really negative thought patterns, right? Just like everything is the worst, nothing ever works out. you probably know the drill. And the way to really overcome that is, according to all the research on this, is yes, to focus on positives in your life and like journal and be grateful. But like the thing to do is to meditate. And people don't like to hear that. They're like, I hate meditation. I just want to sit there and be anxious. And I did too. I really didn't like it at first. I actually never really got to like really liking it, but it was effective for me. My neuroticism did go down through this meditation class that I took.
I don't have time to meditate. I'm busy catastrophizing.
I know. I felt the
Yeah.
same way. Now I
No,
don't have time to meditate because I have a kid, but yeah.
yeah, I hear that from so many good friends of mine. I've been meditating for years, and I started because I got recruited by the TM organization, the David Lynch organization, because they did that with a whole bunch of us in media. And he did one-on-one. He trained me, and fine, it worked. He gave me the mantra, but the whole thing was I didn't like it. It was a little uncomfortable. It was a little too forced. But then I changed. I, like you, follow and am friends with Dan Harris, and I learned so much from him. And I love that you included loving kindness meditation and Sharon Salzberg's work in there, and that you did it, because that is really very helpful to me. I think about a person I hate. Most days I think about a person I hate in my meditation, my loving kindness meditation.
Wow.
And it has really made a difference. I still hate this one guy a lot, but I sometimes I throw him in there, and others as well. So I'm so glad that is the one that you landed on, and the one that the science has a lot to say about meditation, because it certainly has made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, you can really do any kind. And my thing was way too long. It was like 45 minutes long every
Yeah.
day, but you can do 10 minutes or 15, however long.
Yeah, yeah. So I would just say try a bunch of different things, which you did for the research for the book. And I think that you have to find the thing that works for you. But I don't have a lot of patience for people who say they don't have time for these things. I don't have a lot of patience for people who say they don't have time for things, period. Because I always feel like, oh, you're super busy, huh? I don't do anything
Yeah.
around. I just stare at the wall, especially to someone like yourself who's got a little kid. Oh, I don't have time. Really? I have a 1-year-old, and I found a way. I'm much more judgmental.
With some of this stuff, I found that if you just do it, if you take the time to really do it, it sets up your day to be more productive. Especially some of the stuff that I did with conscientiousness and what some of the other people that I talked to did. So conscientiousness is the trait that's like being organized and diligent. A lot of that stuff is like habits that if you set up, you actually become more productive, even if there's a little bit of work at the front end.
You are good at that, so that wasn't one of them that you had to tackle, but I am not good at it. I work as hard as anybody and as many hours as everybody, but I don't think I'm as efficient and always as productive, and certainly not as organized. I'm a mess. I've got papers everywhere. I've got reminders. I'm the king of the Post-it note. Thank God for Post-it notes, or I would forget things. So tell us a little bit about how you can become more conscientious. What's a tool for that? What works?
So the big thing that I kept hearing over and over again was decluttering. So decluttering your possessions, just throwing as much away as possible. If it's papers, take pictures of them, throw them away, get a filing cabinet, file stuff, but mostly throw it away. And that kind of includes like your obligations too. Like a lot of people that I talked to found that they were trying to cram too many things into too little time. And then it led to feeling frazzled or letting things fall through the cracks because there wasn't technically enough time to get everything done. And so part of it was just like trying to say no to stuff that's not like a high priority so that they actually can complete like the tasks that actually need to be done. I know that sounds really simple, but that is something that like really helped a lot of the people that I talked to get to conscientiousness.
No, I love it. I just find myself decluttering all the time. It just gets cluttered, and I declutter. And I get depressed or frustrated that at 49, this is still a thing. I get embarrassed is the best word. Embarrassed that I'm still messy, that I still have stuff everywhere. It's embarrassing to me. I'm a grown adult human, and I still have shit everywhere. I sometimes can't find things, or I even still forget things. I've got 2 adult daughters that I'm begging to not make the same mistakes and fall in the same habits that I do when they're busy and successful, and there's a lot of demands on their time. So it was good to read the book and know there is hope for people like me.
Yeah, absolutely. Decluttering is one thing. And then the other technique that I saw that was effective in that for that trait is this thing called episodic future thinking, which is just imagining very specifically what the positive outcome looks like, or what the outcome looks like if you stay on the track that you're on. So this is like very helpful if you really don't want to make that phone call, send that email, get up and go for that run, do whatever it is, the hard thing that you have to do to reach your goal. It's this strategy of picturing yourself, okay, so you've trained for the marathon, you're crossing the finish line, all your family is cheering for you, you're getting the little tiny cup of water or whatever. That can really motivate people whenever things feel really difficult, which they often do with conscientiousness.
I feel like it's a perfect example, but I also feel like you aren't a marathoner because you referenced the little cup of water as being the prize. But am I wrong?
I'm not a marathoner. I'm sorry. I have not actually run a marathon. I like barely run, but yeah, I guess
Uh,
the little cups of water are along the way.
Either way, I love it. Okay, you also worked on trying to be more agreeable. You mentioned earlier in your relationship, you're the less agreeable one than Rich, your husband. And I need to work on that too. So to say the least, what is that about? Define it? What does it mean to be not agreeable, disagreeable in life, in your relationship? And what do we do to become more agreeable? Because I remember reading this phrase. I love this Richard Carlson. He's sadly passed away, but he wrote How to Be Happy No Matter What, and How to Sweat the Small Stuff, and all those things. And there is this chapter on relationships, I think, and it's, would you rather be happy or right? Olga, I
Mhm.
would rather be right.
Me too.
So bad. It's so bad. And then I didn't have any issues for a while. And I told my friend who gave me the advice, and I was like, yeah, it's been going great. I haven't had any issues. And then do you want an award? So what is the answer? How do you identify it? And what are the tools, solutions?
Yeah, the people who would rather be right than happy are disagreeable. And I don't like that. Like, we can go to bed mad at each other as long as he sees the Wikipedia page that proves that I was correct. So disagreeableness is what it sounds like. You're prickly. You have strong opinions. You think about other people, but they tend not to be as important to you as you are. You're not like a cuddly Care Bear. And this one is really hard to change. There was that tweet a few years ago that's, I don't know how to tell you that you should care about other people. And that is the problem, is that it's very hard to get people to care about agreeableness or be more agreeable. One thing that I found is like that helped me be less angry at my partner in particular is to try to have more empathy for him when he was doing something that made me mad. This was something that came through in an anger management class that I took, and also weirdly was a word of advice from my therapist. But often I found that when I would get mad at him, it's because I didn't totally understand what he was going through or what he was thinking when
Mm.
he did whatever the offense was. And so getting a better sense of that actually turned down my anger a little bit, because it didn't seem like it was like he was doing something to hurt me. It made it more, I don't know, reasonable or rational.
Yeah, yeah. That's really helpful to think about it that way. And speaking of drugs, there's a section in there, huh? What was your experience with, and what was your journalistic idea of them before? I feel once Michael Pollan writes a book, everybody's like, all right, let me take a look at this. It must be credible. Oprah's over here holding the book now. But we're talking about psychedelics, and you have some good research and some interesting thoughts about it. So what was your experience? What were your thoughts ahead of time? What did you learn?
So, psychedelics are really the key to openness to experiences, which is this very weird personality trait that's basically like being more open to things, like up for whatever, open to new experiences and people and adventures and things like that. So, one thing that seems to be coming through in the research is that when people take psychedelics, that increases their openness to experiences for at least maybe a few months. And for whatever reason, that increased openness helps them get over their past traumas. If done in a correct way with like therapy and it's all official and guided and all of that stuff. Don't just do drugs on your own. But for some reason, this openness is like unlocks the key to like getting over trauma. And I talked to people who like really did have this experience. Like they took MDMA, huge whopping dose of it. They had been through some really horrible stuff, before, took this MDMA, saw like incredible visions and just stuff. And like, they're so connected and saw themselves as a child and saw this and saw that and felt all these like incredible things, and then didn't feel traumatized anymore by their experience. I thought that was like very hopeful and uplifting. But I will say that the studies that I'm talking about were done by MAPS, which recently got in hot water over some of their research practices. It's not that the whole studies are like invalid or like this doesn't work, but it's more like they just there's some questions about basically how they conducted these studies
Right.
that raised eyebrows. So it made me a little bit nervous about recommending this on a larger scale.
Have you ever anecdotally talked to somebody who went on a guided trip with an expert who had great regrets though? Because like I feel like everybody's the kind of thing, behavior determines the way we talk about things. If you have a good experience, the way that you talk about it, and this, maybe especially with drugs, just proselytize about it. But I feel like every single person I talk to about it, and now that you and I are talking about it, I'm going to hear from a whole bunch of listeners are like, dude, amazing. I saw my life. I saw my childhood. I saw everything in a different way. And I'm a changed person. I've heard that almost exclusively for people who take guided trips. So I'm sure there are plenty of, and I'm sure I'll hear from people now that say, what didn't work for me. So what did you hear? What did you learn just anecdotally? Did you do it?
Um, so I have taken mushrooms in the past, like a very small dose, not for this book, just a few years ago. And
Okay.
I will say that they did not really do anything for me. I did have a trip. I went outside and colors seemed more colorful and nature seemed more naturey, but I wasn't like, whoa, this is the answer. I was just, okay. So I've heard of underwhelming experiences. I've had an underwhelming experience. I've heard of some bad experiences that people have had. But it really, like the stuff that I'm writing about in the book is for people who have like really severe trauma. So even if they take the drug and there's some negative side effect, that's still better than whatever they're dealing with.
And I've heard that anecdotally too, but you can even quote cure trauma, treat trauma and cure trauma. People can be almost free of it at times through not only this and other issues. So just to give folks hope that are dealing with that, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, yeah. The woman that I talked to for this chapter did feel like she was cured.
It's amazing. What was it that your meditation teacher told you, that saying that stuck? I was in the grocery store listening to an interview you did about the book, which we're talking about, Me, But Better. And I heard it and I stopped my cart in the beans aisle. I was like, oh, that's good.
She would always say things happen that we don't like. Was that it? Okay, so that to me for some reason was so mind-blowing because I always thought that I was responsible for making everything happen in a certain way or like making everything go perfectly. And then when she just said sometimes things happen that we don't like, I was just like, "Oh, she's right. Like everyone goes through dumb BS and like stuff they don't want and stuff not working out and that's not your fault." And that was I don't know, that was like I think the first step to my like healing journey in air quotes.
I love it. I love it. I've learned so much from reading Buddhism and Stoicism over the past few years. It's supposed to be part of my daily practice is reading philosophy, or specifically, I've been selling Pema Chodron, the Buddhist
Oh
priest,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
things fall apart. And even more specifically for me, this book, Taking the Leap, it's all beaten up. I got to buy a new one. So I'll underline. I get reminded of different practices, different ideas, and so on all the time. How much of changing your personality when it comes to anxiety, worry, and depression do you think reading? Because reading your book has made a huge difference to me. Reading books like yours and the ones I'm mentioning make a huge difference to solving these personality issues. No?
Yeah, I think reading can be a huge part of this. Like a big part, especially for the traits of neuroticism, for example, it is so mental, right? It's all about your mindset and how you think about things, which is why in some ways harder to change than something like extroversion, which is just, okay, go out and talk to people. You really do have to like think about things differently. And for me, I really connect with books and with writing in general. And so for me, it's always, I don't know, it's always something that helps me. And if there's a message in a book that really resonates. Honestly, in my book, I feel silly about this, but I quote David Axelrod talking to Dan Harris and saying, all we can do is all we can do, which just means you can do your best, but you can't do more than your best. At a certain point, you have to give up and to me, because I'm such a control freak and an achiever, that is like a helpful mantra that I tell myself all the time, even though it's not from Pino Chadron or whatever.
Yeah, say what you will about anything that people know about David Axelrod. My understanding is he has a special needs kid. And I'm always interested in talking to people who have kids that are on the spectrum or special needs of in any way, because it's just that much more maintenance and challenging. So coming to the conclusion of all we can do is what we can do is probably something a lot of folks that have that kind of situation have to deal with, that they're taking care of somebody else. There's just so much you can control about your own personality. You can't necessarily control somebody else's, which I guess is probably another good question. How do I control other people, Olga?
This is so people keep asking. I was like, I should have written a chapter that's like how to change other people's personality. It's really hard. You really can't. This is the kind of stuff like the person has to be ready for change, and you can't change someone who doesn't want to be changed. That's all true here, because it's work. It's a change in habits, behaviors, and thinking. You can drag them to improv class, but you can't make them zip zap zap.
Do you think that we should all take, and do you have like links to the personality tests that are effective? There's all these different personality tests. I just don't know which ones are helpful and accurate and to identify our personality traits, many of which you write about.
Sure. Yeah, you can go to personalityassessor.com, which is a website that was created by the professor whose research is like the backbone of the book. And if you can't find that website or don't want to, just find a test that's the IP. I think there's like one that's 120 questions and one that's 300 questions. So the IP is like what he uses, and it's like the standard.
What does the test tell about someone who lies a little bit on the test?
So a small number of people do lie, but actually most people have a pretty good sense of their personality, and they don't tend to lie. But yeah, if you're trying to show like your boss how extroverted you are or something, then you might lie.
Right. No, if you're trying to actually make an improvement in your life, be honest. No one else. It's not for anybody but you. So in the end of this year-long experience in writing and publishing this book, you personally, how have you been able to maintain the improvements or changes that you wanted to make and that you have made?
I think one big change that I've made, so I'm a new mom, and I think that first year, or honestly, like all the years of parenthood can be isolating because it's very intensive work with someone who doesn't talk. And I think I would have approached it completely differently before this project. I think I would have just focused on me and the baby and just isolated further. But instead, I've really tried to make a conscious effort to reach out to other moms, meet up with other moms, learn from other moms, just make more connections, because it's like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's good. Even if we just have some dumb play date that's 35 minutes and our kids like pull each other's hair, it's still better than sitting in our house and singing Baby Beluga again. Like I don't know. To me, that's been a big change, is that I just saw like how important it is to have that kind of community.
I love it. I love it very much. I love the book is for everybody, right? Who's the book for?
Anyone, people who are interested in science, people who like funny writing. Yeah. People who like me, people who don't like me.
Everybody likes you, I'm guessing. I just pitched it to somebody else who wasn't actually familiar with you, who's definitely going to reach out, because I've been following your work forever and always been a big fan of your writing in the Atlantic. Of course, your last book, which I think is probably still selling a lot of copies, very important. But this one is a game changer, and it's going to be for a lot of people because of your approach. But yeah, I gotta say, for me, it was just like the easiest thing to read because I laughed so much and really got to like you even more than you did. And I really want to meet your husband. I actually think I want to marry him. I know that sounds weird. He sounds so great. Or just spend some time with him and pick up on it. I want to go surfing with you guys. It's great. It's a great trip. It's a great read. And I learned a lot. Congratulations to you, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
And